Car Guy Radio Show.
I say this calls for action, and now.
Walk me up to love and start forever now. Forever now. Take my heart forever now. Forever now. Just say yes forever now.
Welcome to the Christian Car Guy Show this morning here out of rainy, wet North Carolina with Florence moving in. Obviously, this is not the voice of Robbie Dillmore. I am Darren Kuhn, guest hosting for Robbie this morning with Bob Young and another good friend of mine, my grandson, Carson Kuhn, is in the studio with us this morning. And we're going to have a blast. Robbie is gone to Samford University this weekend. He's having a Parents' Day or Parents' Weekend down there with his daughter Mariah. And so he's down in Birmingham, Alabama. And Bob, how about the hurricane that's been coming through here?
Well, they say it's coming, but it just seems to sit there and sit there and sit there. When I went to bed last night, I woke up this morning expecting it to be in quite a different position, and it's not moved much at all. It's just sitting and pelting and raining and
yeah, my wife was telling me about a meme she saw on Facebook where a couple had sat down on their rocking chairs on the front porch waiting for the hurricane to come in, and then it showed them as skeletons a little while later. Because
that's about to say
it's taken its time, but it is starting to rain up here in the central Piedmont area, and we are as prepared as we can be, but praying for those folks that are out on the coast, all up and down the Carolinas. I know so many people that are there that are have gone, left their houses, don't know exactly what kind of shape their houses are in right now. And so definitely, if you're listening all over America, I know we're from coast to coast, please be praying for your brothers and sisters across the country that are being affected by these storms. There's some down on the Gulf Coast as well right now. And, well, today we're going to talk about classic cars and how to get one, and more so if you have a grandson, like my grandson, Carson. Carson, how old are you?
13.
13. Okay, I've almost forgot. I'm so old. But Carson's 13. Carson has a dirt bike, and he wants a truck or a muscle car or perhaps, a Lamborghini or something. But anyway, he would love to be a NASCAR driver, a NASCAR engineer, something like that. And so cars are in his future as he sees his future right now. And so we've been talking a lot about cars over the last few years. And Carson lives with me and my wife, and we enjoy having him. And I get to be a better parent as a grandparent than I was to my own kids. And my kids give me a hard time about that periodically. But
that's one of my biggest regrets. After Rob passed a few years ago, I kept waiting. I waited for 2 years for some young lady to walk up and say, "Hey, this is your grandson," and
you want to borrow mine? I've got 6 of them.
Do you have a leash
Bob.
program?
Yeah, I do. We've got a rental program going on. So I'm sure Carson would love to hang out with you. But anyway, we've been talking a lot about cars, and when Robbie asked me to host the show with Bob, and one of the things that really came to my mind was the glory set before us, and how hard that is to realize when we are only 8 or 10 or 53 like I am right now. And so I started thinking back, what would I have liked to have known about cars and just about life when I was a younger man, and how might that have changed some things?
I'd have liked to have known that I was going to live to 60. And because back in my younger days, I figured 30, 35 tops, and I'd have probably took a little bit better care of myself.
Yeah, were you living like 30 to 35 tops was going to be it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the fun button got stuck, and a lot of throttle, not much brake.
Okay,
You know?
I gotcha. So, well, my life has been one of a lot of different things, but Robbie and I met several years ago, and having a friend who's called the Christian Car Guy and a friend who's called the Christian Junkyard Guy is a kind of cool place for me. I love cars. My dad loved cars. And I spent the vast majority of my life in business or in ministry, and never got to fulfill my car dreams. But when I was a young boy, my dad one time came home from work and said, "Darren, jump in the car with me. We're going to go look at a car." And I said, "Okay." So I jumped in the car with him, and we would do this on a regular basis. Dad probably had 100 different cars in my lifetime. And so we would go look. I mean, I remember I grew up in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and we would drive all the way to the panhandle of Texas to look at a car, 3 or 4 hours, and just spend the whole day in the car talking back and forth. And it was just good times. I remember those times well. I loved spending time with my dad, loved working on cars with my dad. But this was when I was about Carson's age. And Dad came home one day, and I was probably 13 or 14, and he said, "Jump in the car, we're going to go look at a car." And I said, "Oh, okay, what are we going to go look at?" And he said, "Well, I'll show you when we get there." I said, "All right." So we drove up to this field, and there was this light blue 1965 Plymouth Barracuda sitting in the field. 273 Commando, 6-pack, Hurst shifter, the little bubble back. It had been sitting in that field for several years. So you know the story, Bob. If a car's been sitting in a field for several years, even out in the West, there's probably some rust in it. The windows had leaked. The floor panels were starting to rot out and stuff like that. But my dad had already bought the car for me. I didn't know that. $125 he paid for a 1965 Plymouth Barracuda. But we took it and we hooked it up and we pulled it home and got it running over a period of time. I never got to drive that car as a licensed driver, though. I'll tell the rest of that story later. But that was my dream car. I wanted a muscle car. I wanted a hot rod, wanted to work on it. And I spent a lot of hours working on that car in the garage growing up and never got to drive it.
Wow.
So I'll tell the rest of that story later. But in relation to that, as I was thinking about this show, God brought to mind Hebrews 11 and Hebrews 12. And so in Hebrews 11, if you remember, if you got your Bibles, you can open up to Hebrews 11. But Hebrews 11:1 says, "Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen." So I don't know a young boy, honestly, and a lot of young girls, quite frankly, who are not dreaming about something in the future, dreaming about a car, dreaming about a college, dreaming about something that's going to change their life in their understanding of things. And so you don't often think about the Bible talking about things like that, but here it is. The Hebrew writer is saying, yeah, this is what faith is, what belief is, conviction is, and it's when you truly, truly believe in something that's out there and you're willing to be so convicted about it, you're willing to work towards it. And that's what we're going to be talking about this morning on the Christian Car Guy Show.
Seeing things is one thing, but having conviction about the unseen, that's where it really gets tough and different. And, I find myself having to, when faith is only thing that can carry you through some situations.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing how well it will carry you through.
So, if you've got a story about that car that you just wanted to have all of your life and finally got your hands on it, or that car that maybe you never got your hands on, and you want to talk about it this morning, feel free to call in 866-34-TRUTH. That's 866-34-TRUTH. Come back after the break for the Christian Car Guy Show. Oh man, the barn finds. I don't know if you guys have ever listened. I love that little song, "Found Her in a Barn in Tennessee." There's a YouTube guy called Barn Find Hunters, and he's sponsored by Haggerty's, and he goes all over the country finding these premier cars in a barn, or something like that. The other day I was watching one where he found a 69 Ferrari GT, and
that was more than $50, wasn't it?
that was more than $50. Yeah, it was like $4 million worth of cars in one barn.
And see, it's so much better if you don't understand the concept. If you find them out in a field, that's one thing. But if you find them in the barn, they've been sheltered from the elements, and it's a much, much, much better find.
Right.
Galactically better.
Yes. Yeah, it's in a whole different universe, literally. So, well, we've got Tyler on the phone from Greensboro, who has a little bit of a story about how God has provided for him a car in the past. Would love to hear that story, Tyler.
Hey, thanks for answering my call.
Hey, no problem.
Yeah, so it was the first car that I had ever owned. I didn't get my first car until I was 22. I didn't get my license. No, actually 23. I didn't get my license until I was 22. I just moved up to Tennessee, and I was living with four guys in an apartment, living the life. And I needed to ride to work, and people were being really gracious and taking me, but I was getting at the end of my leash with a lot of people. And I had been praying to the Lord to just help me to, I wanted to do his will by working. And I knew that working was his will for me, and that he was going to provide a way for me to get to work and do the things that I had to do. Well, the people at the church that I went to, an elderly couple came up to me one day and they said, "Tyler, we just want to give you this car." It was a 1999 Chevy Blazer. And I was extremely thankful, and I was extremely happy because the Lord had provided in the simple way of me getting a car. It wasn't fancy, but it did everything that I needed it to. Unfortunately, it started spark knocking about 6 months after I had it. And around the same time, another couple who wasn't aware of my car troubles came up to me and they said, "Hey, we have an extra car that we would like for you to have." So as soon as the Blazer busted, I was actually given another car. It was a 2006 Nissan Murano. So the Lord has been extremely gracious to me when it comes to my driving situation.
That is an awesome story, Tyler. I appreciate you calling and sharing that with us. And that brings to, Robbie has the Jesus Labor of Love, and Bob, that's been something that's really been on your heart too. I know that you've helped with that quite a bit.
It was, when he first mentioned it to me, I was like, wow, how'd you come up with that? But, the Lord laid it on his heart that he should help widows and single moms and people with need to keep their car going. And we've even had some donations come in of a whole car where we were able to hook somebody up with a vehicle. Mm-hmm. And Robbie's just really helped out a lot of folks. And yeah, we were able to provide a few parts, and he has some mechanics that will provide free labor and help out. And it's just been amazing how many folks he's helped with that.
Yeah, so if you're listening somewhere in the United States and you have access to an automotive shop. Maybe your buddy owns an automotive shop, or maybe you're a mechanic at an automotive shop, or you own one, and you would like to be able to help widows, single moms, people in need in your area, please contact Robbie. Let him know that you're there. Literally, people call him from all over the United States who hear about it through the internet or through radio and different things. And it is a blessing. It is a lot of work, though, too. If you're listening and you're local to this area and you're thinking, man, I would love to volunteer for a ministry like that and help out.
Or donate.
You
can go on the Christian Car Guy website, and my wife and I have helped out with that. And so the donations are what carry it.
Right.
It's people get interested and want to help, and but they may not have mechanical ability, but still want to help. But
right.
Even the small donations add up and have made such a difference through the years.
So we opened up the show talking about the hurricane that is still in the Carolinas right now, and I just got a text a few minutes ago from my wife that my sister-in-law's house has gotten hit pretty hard. They were able to wade through water. They can't get to her house by vehicle yet, but they were able to wade through water and get to her house. They evacuated and found trees on the house and on the garage, and it's...
What area is that house?
It's just south of Wilmington, Winnebago area of North Carolina, which is just between Wilmington and Calabash.
Well, in my mind, I thought I would wake up this morning and it would have moved inland a little bit. It's still half over the ocean and half over land, and
it's still churning away.
And
the rivers are flooding all over the place. Carson's grandmother lives in New Bern, and they had to evacuate their house, and hopefully it's on high enough ground. But this morning, among that, if you've got prayer requests regarding that, or praise, where God's done something to miraculously kind of spare your house or friends or whatever, we'd love to hear that as well. If you want to call in to 866-34-TRUTH, that's 866-34-TRUTH, 348-7884. And we would love to talk to you about that. Before the last break, I was telling you about my 65 Barracuda with the 273 Commando motor and the 6-pack carburetor. I never could get those 6-pack.
Let me explain the
right.
6-pack. That's 3 deuces. That's 3 2-barrel carburetors on it. For people that don't understand the jargon and everything.
I'm glad you did that.
A 6-pack on a car is 3 2-barrel carburetors.
Yeah, it's not running around with a 6-pack of beer on the top of your car or anything like that. That's 3 2-barrel carburetors. We are the Christian Car Guy Radio Show this morning, filling in for Robbie, however feebly we can accomplish that. Would love for you to go to the Christian Car Guy website and donate to Jesus Labor of Love. You can find a lot of different things on there as well. Come back after the break.
Here I come in my 57, she's a real low rider. Pink perfection with a custom engine painted black with flame. Ain't nobody gonna call that.
I don't suppose you've ever heard that song, have you, Carson?
Nope.
Well, we're talking about kind of getting your first car. And, there's a lot of first cars out there. And Robbie has on his website, on the Christian Car Guy show website, his first car, which was a 1960 Rambler American. And he tells the story about, his dad owned a car dealership at the time. And so Robbie thought he was going to get, probably whatever car he wanted, off the dealership lot. And that didn't happen that way. His dad made him work for that first car, and so he spent a whole summer working to earn $90.
Didn't he have an Opel GT at one time?
I think he's had about every car there's ever been at one time or another. I know he had an AMC AMX Javelin at one time, too. That was a little bit older. But I remember him telling me that story because I was really, really jealous because that was one that I really wanted when I was a kid. Just thought those Javelins looked so cool, and with a big old 403 motor in it, that was would have been a great car to have. Would still love to have one, but today you need about $50,000 to get your hands on one of those.
When you told me about our topic for the day and how much more people will appreciate something if they get it and work toward it, and that lesson, it just really touched my heart, and it fell in line with what I talked about a couple of weeks ago on the show about, how we can give too much to our kids instead of letting them earn it and making them appreciate it more by what they had to put into it, and rather instead of just having stuff handed to you.
Right.
It really touched my heart. What a great subject for the day.
Well, we've got Carson, my grandson, is here in the studio with us. And about 2.5 years ago, Carson decided he wanted to buy a dirt bike. And so, Carson, how did that work out when you came to Granny and I and said, "Hey, I want a dirt bike"? How'd that work out?
You said I could get a dirt bike, but you said I'd have to work for it and pay for it myself. You said you'd help me, but I would have to pay the majority of the money.
Yeah. And so you started doing a little bit of work. You started asking, I don't know if you even remember this, but you started asking immediately, Granny, can I do this? Granny, can I do that? What can I wash the car? What can I do to make $20? What can I do to make,
he was
whatever?
Inspired, huh?
Yeah, he was motivated. So, and he started saving money. And then what happened to the money that you were saving?
I decided I couldn't make enough. So I just started spending it and spending it and spending it, and sooner or later, I had nothing left.
And so that first summer, did you get your motorbike?
Nope.
Lost your focus a tad there, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, bless his heart. He'd get like $250 saved up, and then he'd spend 50 of it, and then he'd get mad at himself, or mad at somebody. It might have been me, who knows? But he'd get frustrated, and then not get it. And so the next summer, what happened?
Next summer, I started working, and I said, "Don't give me any money." And Papa goes, "Well, don't ask how much money you're making, or how long you're gonna be working, or how much money you're going to be making an hour or anything. Just work your butt off." And I ended up with a dirt bike that year.
There you go. And so, and he appreciates it. And he takes care of it.
Absolutely. It's just such a different thing when you've had to work for something than when it's just laid in your lap.
Right. The same thing, he's got a really nice Trek mountain bike and that he bought. I helped him out a little bit. I fronted him a little bit of money. He had some money to put towards it, and I fronted him a little bit of other money, but told him, you got to work this off. This is, a couple of weeks worth of work that I'm giving you. And so we went to Colorado this summer and spent a couple of weeks up there building a deck on a cabin. And so he worked that off this summer. But he's learned, it's funny, the things, and I won't sell him out here, but it is funny to me that sometimes he does understand that some of the kids his age do not appreciate what they have because they didn't have to pay for it. And I know that's true with you and me, Bob. When we go out and we work for something and we buy it, then
it's just such a life lesson, It's if you think about it, it's so easy to figure this out, like if something just appears and you didn't have to do anything, it's not appreciated as much as something you really had to work and wait and invest a lot of your time and effort and focus to obtaining it.
Mm-hmm. And so, we mentioned that in Hebrews 11, the Hebrew writer talks about all these great people. Noah, who, being warned, spends 120 years building an ark before it floods. 120 years operating by faith.
In the desert.
Yeah, operating by faith and waiting for it to start raining. And yet he does it, and he keeps going because he believes God. And there are so many things about, when I grew up, I think I had the impression that God didn't want me to have more things than he did want me to have. I think that's the impression I had of God. And I don't know where I got it. I probably wasn't, a preacher that told me that or anybody else. But for whatever reason, I thought God was kind of the God of no more than the God of yes. And I didn't really understand what this whole idea of he wants to give me the desires of my heart. And that scared me, quite frankly, at times, thinking, well, no, wait a minute. I'm not sure I want good things for myself, and so why would God want to give me something that's not necessarily good for myself? And of course, I had to reconcile the theology behind that, and that, if you line yourself up with God's will, then it's pretty easy for him to give you the desires of your heart.
For years, I thought there was a certain type of woman I thought I needed in my life for me to be happy. And
how does Lori feel about that?
Well, it was not the type of person she is, and it went miserably wrong for so long, miserably wrong. And then God put it on my heart just to find a good woman, a good woman. I had this picture in my head, and then when I started pursuing a person of the caliber that God had in mind for me, what I needed to balance me out, because it takes a lot of balancing, because I had issues and this and that, but God placed the perfect person in my life, and everything, it's just made so many things the way they needed to be. I'm not sure I'd make it through some of the really tough things that I've been through in life without Lori by my side. And just what a blessing that God placed her in my life, and we made it work, and she's still by my side.
Well, it is interesting how God knows not only what we need, but he also knows what the truest desires of our heart are. And he's okay with supplying that. And God is often looked at as the God of no rather than the God of yes. And so I'm
glad he said no to the things that some of the things that I had
true story,
planned for me.
Right. And there's a whole different lesson there. Obviously, there are many times when God doesn't give us what we think we want, and knowing that what the truest desire of our heart is perhaps real community, real fellowship with him, with others, somebody that can love us and in spite of our baggage.
It's kind of like the Garth Brooks song, "Thanks God for Unanswered Prayers."
Exactly, I was thinking of that too. So I guess great minds think alike, and
you
then
be nervous if you're
us.
thinking like me.
Yeah. So so the question is if you have a kid in your life, a grandson, a granddaughter, a daughter, a son, niece, nephew, whatever, and they're getting to this age, how do you help them understand that working their tail off for a $90 American Rambler, or working their tail off for whatever they get, in Carson's case it's a 100cc CRF Honda dirt bike, or a bicycle at this point, how is that more valuable for them? And it's hard. I mean, you can be just really harsh and say, well, when you save up the money, you're going to get it. Or you can build some enticements in there. You can build some motivational factors in there and help them get it. You want them to have some small wins, and I think Carson has gotten that. So I'm looking for this next big win, and we're going to talk about that after the break. You're listening to the Christian Car Guy Show. Please go to ChristianCarGuy.com and look at a way that maybe you could help out with Jesus' labor of love by donating money, a car, or services.
Well, if you ever plan to go to west, like a highway, sunrise, chase down a highway.
Welcome back to the Christian Car Guy Show here on a rainy Saturday morning here in North Carolina. If you're listening across the country, please keep the folks in your prayers that are being affected by these hurricanes already. Just found out this morning that my wife's sister's house got hit by evidently multiple trees, fairly new home. And down just south of Wilmington, and the wind hadn't quit there yet, and the rain hadn't quit there yet, and know several people that have already been displaced out of their homes, and I guess this time last year, Bob, my business partner and I went with Andy Bowersox and Energized Ministries. We went down to Houston,
Texas, yeah.
Yep, and spent a week down there. Helping victims of Hurricane Harvey, and there's still work going on down there. There's still people recovering from that, and it was an amazing week. It was hard, not physically. I mean, there were times where it was hot and muggy and nasty, but it was just hard seeing
People struggle.
It just breaks your heart. To see how many people were really messed up there. And this thing's not over here. The rivers are still climbing, and it's not going to be over when it leaves the Carolinas. It's going to be going up into the Appalachian Mountains, and people in West Virginia and southern Ohio and eastern Kentucky, and all of those places are going to be flooded. And there's not a lot anybody can do about it except prepare. We're prepared at our house as best we can right now. We're prepared to lose power for a few days. If it happens, it happens. And and hopefully, we've got a few trees that could come down on our house too, and we're praying that doesn't happen. But we're also talking about the glory set before us. In Hebrews 11. The Hebrew writer talks about faith is knowing that something is out there even if you can't see it, believing that it's out there for you even if you can't touch it and grasp it, and having that conviction that it's there. And that obviously is talking about the gift of the promise of Jesus. And he goes on to talk about how Noah prepared for years for a promise that he didn't see, and Moses prepared for years for a promise that he didn't see, although Moses got to see a lot of cool things in his life with regard to God setting his people free and rescuing his people from slavery and all of those things. And then the Hebrew writer talks more about David and Barak and all these different cool people, Daniel. And then in Hebrews 12 says, with such a great cloud of witnesses there for us, then we should consider Christ, who considered the glory that was out there. And that glory for Christ is not just the resurrection. It's not just the glory of beating sin. It's the glory of getting to rescue us. I don't know how often we think of ourselves as the glory set before Christ. And yet we are. We are that glorious thing. In some part, we are that glorious thing that Christ suffered for. If you are in the body of Christ today, you are part of that. And to consider yourself this glorious thing that was worth dying for is a pretty amazing thought. And if you're down on yourself, if you're feeling like, man, I just don't have it all together, or I keep messing up, or, everybody hates me, I'm going to eat a worm, however you're feeling today, remember that if you are in Christ, you are part of that glory that was set before Christ, and that he endured the cross looking forward to you and to having a relationship with you. And so we want to apply that a little bit to a car. And so if you've been listening to these stations for a while, and I've helped found the Masculine Journey radio show, and and the Masculine Journey radio boot camps and all of those things as well. And that's where Robbie and I got to meet for the first time. And one of the first things that we teach men in these boot camps is that God created in your heart, in the fact that you are created in his nature, one of the things that you are most like him in is that God wanted to live a great adventure, and he still does. And he does live that great adventure. God also had many battles to fight, and he still does. And he also had a beauty to rescue in the church. You are that beauty to rescue. You are that glorious thing worth rescuing. And so, Bob, you have seen a lot of glorious things go through the junkyard over your career in salvage yard business. And how did that affect your heart when you would see some muscle car or something come through there that you knew, there's 1,000 people out there that would love to have that thing, and here it's been mistreated and dumped off at the salvage yard?
Well, it used to amaze me. You mentioned the car shows at the Barrett Jackson and the Meekum car show, and I would see a car there that was just in pristine condition, and remember back to when one came through the yard that was not quite so pristine,
Yeah.
and just to see what it could have been and how it ended up, it's kind of reminds you of life, There was a time in my life when I was the car dumped off at the junkyard. And then there's times in my life when I've been closer to the car show,
Mm-hmm.
But it's just, they're there. There are cars still out there. There's ones in the barn hiding, waiting to be found and discovered. And until I was found and discovered and polished up a little bit, I didn't resemble the car show car. I was more the one that got hauled to the junkyard and thrown in the press because they were just too far gone.
So how would that change your mind if you're listening right now? If you've got that car in mind, Jasper, one of our producers, said it was the 67 Barracuda for him, and man, I'm a Barracuda guy all the way. I'll take any model from the 65 all the way up to about a 74. If it's a Barracuda, I would love to have it. Can't afford it anymore, but I'd love to have it. But if you knew, because I can look at a 65 Barracuda with rotted out floorboards and know the glory that car could be. And if you knew that God looked at you the same way, that God looks at you and go, yeah, his floorboard's kind of rotted out. Yeah, he's, the weather stripping's pretty well cracked on that one, and the interior's a little messed up. But I see the glory that thing could be. I see the glory Darren could be if he would just let me take him into my shop and do a body off restoration, so to speak.
The master mechanic of life.
Yeah. And so maybe you're thinking this morning that you need a body off restoration. Well, that's not a bad thing. Max Lucado wrote a book years and years ago. One of the first books he ever wrote was called On the Anvil. And it was from the perspective of that hot iron that's on the anvil, getting the hammer coming down on it, being smashed between this cold, hard anvil and this cold, hard hammer. But when God is the one holding the hammer, you can become something fairly miraculous. And so this morning, maybe you've been that old car neglected in the barn or out in the field, and it's time to allow God to bring you into his shop and let the restoration happen. Maybe that could happen at a Masculine Journey Radio boot camp. Robbie Dillmore will be there. Bob's been to some of them. You can go to masculinejourneyradio.org and register.